Arriving at an airport to catch a flight to New York, the millionaire froze when he saw the photo in the hand of an army officer. The same photo of his youthful love who disappeared 25 years ago. The fluorescent lights of Los Angeles International Airport buzzed overhead like angry wasps, casting their harsh glare over the endless stream of travelers hurrying toward their gates. Michael Davenport stood in the security line, his tailored charcoal suit slightly wrinkled from the morning's back-to-back meetings. His leather briefcase containing contracts that would finalize a $40 million deal in Manhattan. At 48, he'd built an empire from concrete and steel, transforming abandoned lots into gleaming towers that pierced the California sky. Yet for all his success, something hollow echoed in his chest, a void that 25 years of wealth couldn't fill. Next, the TSA agent's voice cut through his thoughts. Michael stepped forward, placing his briefcase on the conveyor belt with practiced efficiency. His flight to JFK was boarding in 30 minutes, and he couldn't afford delays. The Meridian Group was expecting him by evening, and this deal would cement his reputation as the West Coast's most formidable real estate mogul. "Sir, I need you to step aside for additional screening." The voice belonged to a young woman in military fatigues, her blonde hair pulled back in a regulation bun. Lieutenant Sophia Reynolds, according to her name tag, couldn't have been older than 24. Her green eyes held the sharp focus of someone trained to spot trouble from a mile away. Part of the anti-terrorism unit stationed at Lax. No doubt. "Is there a problem?" Michael asked, though he knew the drill. Random screenings were part of flying these days, especially for someone who traveled as frequently as he did. "Just routine, sir. This'll only take a minute." Lieutenant Reynolds opened his briefcase with methodical precision, her hands moving through his documents and laptop with professional detachment. Michael watched her work, noting the confidence in her movements, the way she carried herself with military bearing. Despite her youth, there was something familiar about her features, the curve of her jaw, the determined set of her shoulders, but he couldn't place it. She reached into the small front pocket of his briefcase, extracting his business cards, a Mont Blanc pen, and finally, his leather wallet. As she flipped it open to check the contents, a small photograph tucked behind his driver's license caught the light. For a moment, the world around them seemed to pause, the constant chatter of travelers, the mechanical whir of conveyor belts, the boarding announcements. All of it faded into white noise. Lieutenant Reynolds had frozen, her eyes fixed on the photograph in her hands. It was old, the edges worn from years of handling, the colors slightly faded, but the woman in the picture was unmistakable, 23 years old, with cascading dark hair and eyes that sparkled with mischief and warmth. She wore a simple white sundress, caught mid-laugh at some long-forgotten joke. Michael's blood turned to ice as he watched the young officer's face drain of color. She was staring at the photograph, as if she'd seen a ghost, her professional composure cracking like thin ice under sudden pressure. "Where?" Her voice came out as a whisper, barely audible above the airport din. "Where did you get this?" But Michael couldn't answer. He couldn't breathe, because Lieutenant Reynolds had reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out her own photograph, identical to the one she held from his wallet. Except this one was even more worn, carried closer to the heart. Anna. The name escaped his lips like a prayer, like a wound that had never healed. The effect was instantaneous. Lieutenant Reynolds jerked backward as if he'd struck her, her hand instinctively moving to her sidearm. The photograph fluttered to the ground between them like a fallen leaf. "How do you know that name?" Her voice was sharp now, all military training and suspicion. "How do you know my mother's name?" Mother. The word hit Michael like a physical blow. He stared at the young woman before him with new eyes, seeing past the uniform and the defensive stance to the features that had haunted his dreams for 25 years. The same green eyes that had looked at him with such love, such trust, the night before Anna vanished from his life forever. "Your mother," he breathed, his voice breaking. Anna Reynolds. She had a scar on her left hand, shaped like a crescent moon. She used to sing boleros while she cooked, always off-key, but it never mattered because her smile was music enough. She was terrified of thunderstorms but wouldn't admit it. Used to pretend she was checking the windows when lightning flashed. Each word seemed to hit Lieutenant Reynolds like a bullet. Her face went through a kaleidoscope of emotions: confusion, fear, anger, and something else. something that looked almost like recognition. "Stop," she commanded, but her voice wavered. "Just stop talking." "She worked at the textile plant on Industrial Boulevard," Michael continued, unable to stop now that the floodgates had opened. "Third shift, Tuesday through Saturday. She had this way of tucking her hair behind her right ear when she was thinking, and she collected vintage postcards from places she wanted to visit someday." "Shut up." The words came out strangled, desperate. "My mother died in childbirth in 1999. She was alone because my father, some soldier, abandoned her the moment he found out she was pregnant." Michael felt the world tilt on its axis. "Childbirth, no, that's not. Anna disappeared on October 15th, 1999. We were supposed to meet at the diner on Sunset, going to plan our wedding. She never showed. I searched everywhere, hired private investigators, offered rewards. I never knew. Never knew what. But even as she asked, Lieutenant Reynolds' voice had lost its edge, replaced by something rawer, more vulnerable. "I never knew about you," Michael whispered. "I never knew she was pregnant." The silence stretched between them, heavy with 25 years of missed connections and buried truths. Around them, the airport continued its relentless rhythm, but they stood frozen in a bubble of revelation that threatened to shatter everything they thought they knew about their lives. Lieutenant Reynolds bent slowly, mechanically, to retrieve the fallen photograph. She held both pictures side by side, her hands trembling almost imperceptibly. The resemblance was undeniable. The same woman, captured in two different moments, but frozen in time by two people who had loved her. "This is impossible," she said finally, but the conviction had drained from her voice. "Final boarding call for Flight 447 to New York JFK. The announcement echoed through the terminal. Michael didn't move, couldn't move. His flight, his meeting, his $40 million deal. None of it mattered now. Standing before him was living proof that Anna's memory hadn't died with her disappearance, that some part of her had survived and grown into this fierce, beautiful young woman who carried her mother's photograph like a talisman. "I have to go," Lieutenant Reynolds said abruptly, but she made no move to leave. Instead, she stared at him with those familiar green eyes, as if trying to solve a puzzle that would change everything she'd ever believed about herself. "Please," Michael said, his voice raw with 25 years of grief and sudden, impossible hope. "Just give me 5 minutes to explain, Anna. Your mother, she was the love of my life, and if you're her daughter, then you're—" He couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice the possibility that threatened to tear his world apart and rebuild it simultaneously. Lieutenant Reynolds looked at him for a long moment, her training warring with curiosity, duty battling against the desperate need for answers that had shaped her entire life. "One conversation," she said finally. "That's all. And if you're lying to me, if this is some kind of sick game—" "It's not," Michael promised, his heart hammering against his ribs. "I swear to you it's not." As his flight departed without him, Michael Davenport found himself face to face with a ghost made flesh, and the daughter he never knew existed. The airport coffee shop buzzed with the usual chaos of travelers grabbing caffeine before their flights. But Michael and Sophia sat in a corner booth wrapped in their own tense silence. She'd chosen the spot strategically, back to the wall, clear view of all exits. Old habits from military training, he supposed, though right now she looked more like a cornered animal than a seasoned officer. Sophia Reynolds, his daughter, if this impossible situation was real, sat rigidly across from him, both photographs laid out on the scratched formica table between them like evidence in a trial. Her green eyes, so achingly familiar, darted between his face and the pictures, as if she could solve the mystery of her entire life by staring hard enough. "Start talking," she said, her voice carrying the clipped authority of someone used to giving orders. "And I'll know if you're lying." Michael wrapped his hands around his untouched coffee cup, using the warmth to steady himself. Where did he even begin? How do you explain 25 years of grief, of searching, of never giving up hope to someone who'd grown up believing her father was a dead soldier? "I met your mother in the summer of 1998, he began, his voice rough with memory. "I was 23, fresh out of USC with a business degree and more arrogance than sense. My father had just given me a character-building assignment. Inspect one of our properties, a textile factory in East Leigh. I was supposed to evaluate it for sale." Sophia's jaw tightened. Your father owned the factory where my mother worked. Among other things, the Davenport group had fingers in a lot of pies back then. Michael's smile was bitter. Still does, anyway. I walked into that sweltering building expecting to spend 20 minutes checking boxes and writing a report. Instead, I heard this voice. He closed his eyes, and suddenly he was 23 again, stepping into the humid chaos of the factory floor. She was singing Bésame Mucho in Spanish, completely off-key but with so much heart it didn't matter. I followed the sound and found her at one of the sewing stations, this tiny woman with dark hair escaping from her ponytail, dancing a little as she worked. Mom spoke Spanish. Sophia's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something vulnerable underneath. Fluently, said her grandmother taught her, along with all the old songs. Michael opened his eyes, studying Sophia's face for any sign of recognition. When she saw me standing there in my expensive suit, she stopped singing and got this look, half embarrassed, half defiant, like she was daring me to say something about a factory worker having the audacity to be happy. Sophia said nothing, but her fingers traced the edge of Anna's photograph with unconscious tenderness. I asked her about the song, Michael continued, told her she had a beautiful voice, which made her laugh. She said I obviously needed my ears checked, but she invited me to hear the real version at a club in Boyle Heights that weekend. Said if I could handle the neighborhood, she'd show me what real music sounded like. And you went. It wasn't a question. I went. The memory was so vivid it hurt. Wore jeans and a t-shirt, tried to fit in, but I stuck out like a sore thumb. Anna showed up in this red dress that made every man in the place stop and stare. But she only had eyes for me. We danced to mariachi music until my feet bled, and she laughed every time I stepped on her toes. Sophia's composure was cracking. He could see it in the way her hands trembled slightly, in the rapid blinking that suggested she was fighting tears. She had this scar, Michael said softly, knowing he was taking a risk but needing her to believe. On her left hand, between her thumb and index finger, shaped like a crescent moon. She told me she got it as a kid, trying to catch fireflies in a mason jar. The glass broke and cut her, but she said it was worth it because for just a moment, she held starlight in her hands. The coffee cup slipped from Sophia's grip, clattering against the saucer. Coffee sloshed across the table, but neither of them moved to clean it up. How could you possibly know that? She whispered. Grandma Helen said Mom never talked about her childhood, said it was too painful. Because I kissed that scar 100 times, Michael said, his voice breaking. Because she told me that story on our third date. Sitting on the beach in Santa Monica, watching the sunset, because I was planning to put the engagement ring right there, on that finger, the night she disappeared. Sophia shot up from her seat, pacing to the window like a caged tiger. Her reflection in the glass looked ghostly, insubstantial, as if she might disappear just like her mother had. This is insane, she muttered, pressing her palms against the cool glass. You're describing someone who doesn't exist. My mother was alone, abandoned. She died giving birth to me because she had no one. Anna was never alone, Michael said firmly. Not while I was breathing. I would have moved heaven and earth for that woman. Then where were you? Sophia spun around, her composure finally shattering. Where were you when she needed you? When I needed you? The pain in her voice hit him like a physical blow. I don't know, he admitted. God help me. I don't know. She was supposed to meet me at Mel's Diner on Sunset Boulevard on October 15th, 1999. We were going to plan our wedding. Nothing fancy, just us and a justice of the peace, because Anna didn't want to wait for some big ceremony. She wanted to be my wife. He stood slowly, his legs unsteady. I waited until they closed, went to her apartment, but the landlord said she'd packed up and left that afternoon. No forwarding address, no explanation, I thought. I thought she'd changed her mind about us, about marrying someone from my world. Your world, Sophia repeated, bitter. Right. The rich boy and the factory girl. Very Romeo and Juliet. It felt like that sometimes, Michael admitted. My father didn't approve, said Anna was gold digging, that she'd trap me with a pregnancy and take half our fortune in the divorce. Sophia went very still. Pregnancy. I told him he was wrong, that Anna wasn't like that, but when she disappeared, Michael's voice cracked. I wondered if maybe he'd been right all along. If maybe she'd found someone else. Someone who could give her a simpler life. So you just gave up? No. The word came out like a gunshot. I searched for her for years. Hired private investigators. Put up missing person flyers. Offered rewards. I checked every hospital. Every morgue. Every homeless shelter from San Diego to San Francisco. I never stopped looking. Sophia turned back to the window, her reflection wavering. Grandma Helen told me my father was a soldier named James Sullivan. Said he died in Kosovo before I was born. That Mom was heartbroken and never got over losing him. James Sullivan doesn't exist, Michael said gently. Or if he does, he wasn't your father. How can you be so sure? Michael pulled out his phone, fingers flying over the screen. Because I never stopped loving your mother. Because every year on her birthday, I donate to the literacy program she cared about because I kept our apartment exactly as she left it for 5 years, hoping she'd come back. He turned the screen toward her. On it was a photograph of a small, sunny apartment with yellow walls and white curtains, a bookshelf filled with romance novels, a kitchen table set for 2. This was supposed to be our first home together, he said. I bought it the week before she disappeared. The papers are still in both our names. Sophia stared at the image, her breathing shallow. She loved yellow, she whispered. Grandma Helen said it was Mom's favorite color, but she could never afford to paint. I painted those walls myself, Michael said. Spent 3 days getting the shade exactly right. Anna said it had to be sunshine yellow, not banana yellow. I must have bought 12 different paint samples before I found the perfect one. The silence stretched between them, heavy with 25 years of missed birthdays. Bedtime stories never read, father-daughter dances that never happened. Sophia wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture so achingly familiar it took Michael's breath away. This doesn't make sense, she said finally. If you loved her so much, if you were planning to marry her, why would she run? Why would Grandma Helen lie about who you were? Michael felt a chill that had nothing to do with the airport's aggressive air conditioning. I don't know, he said slowly, but I think it's time we found out. The drive to Helen Reynolds' old house in Glassell Park took 45 minutes through LA's relentless traffic, but it felt like hours to Sophia. She gripped the steering wheel of her Honda Civic while Michael followed behind in his black Mercedes. And every mile brought new questions that threatened to unravel everything she'd believed about her life. The neighborhood hadn't changed much since her childhood. Modest post-war bungalows with chain-link fences and overgrown bougainvillea, the kind of working-class enclave where people minded their own business and paid their bills on time. Helen's house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, its pale blue paint faded and peeling. The small front yard dominated by the rose bushes her grandmother had tended with religious devotion. Sophia had inherited the property when Helen died 3 months ago, but she hadn't been able to bring herself to clean it out yet. Now, standing on the cracked concrete walkway with Michael beside her, she wondered if some part of her had been waiting for this moment without knowing it. Are you sure about this? Michael asked quietly. His expensive suit looked absurdly out of place in this blue-collar neighborhood, but his expression was gentle, patient. He'd been nothing but respectful during the drive, following at a distance, not pushing her for answers she didn't have. No, Sophia admitted, fishing the key from her pocket. But I need to know the truth, all of it. The front door stuck slightly. It always had. And when it finally gave way, the musty smell of a closed-up house washed over them. Sophia flicked on the lights, revealing the living room exactly as Helen had left it. Crocheted doilies on every surface, family photographs in mismatched frames, and the ancient floral sofa, where Sophia had spent countless afternoons listening to her grandmother's stories about her mother, stories that might have been lies. She kept everything about Mom in the back bedroom, Sophia said, leading Michael down the narrow hallway. Grandma Helen called it a shrine, but I always thought she was just being sentimental. The spare bedroom was small and cramped, dominated by a twin bed covered with one of Helen's handmade quilts. But it was the walls that drew attention. Every available inch was covered with photographs of Anna Reynolds. Anna as a child with pigtails and a gap-toothed grin. Anna as a teenager in her high school graduation cap. Anna at work in the textile factory, laughing with her co-workers during a break. And Anna pregnant, her hand resting on her swollen belly, her face radiant with maternal joy. Michael stopped breathing. "I never saw her like this," he whispered, staring at the pregnancy photos. She was so beautiful. Sophia felt something twist in her chest. Not jealousy exactly, but a complicated mix of grief and longing for the mother she'd never known. Grandma Helen took these. She said Mom glowed when she was carrying me, that she never complained even when her feet swelled and her back ached. She moved to the old secretary desk in the corner, its roll top scarred with decades of use. This is where Grandma kept all the important papers, birth certificates, insurance documents, that kind of thing. The desk's drawers stuck with humidity and age, but Sophia had learned their tricks long ago. The top drawer yielded the usual collection: bank statements, medical records, her grandmother's carefully maintained address book, but it was the bottom drawer that had always been locked. The one Helen claimed contained grown-up business that little girls didn't need to worry about. "I never thought to look for the key after she died," Sophia murmured, running her fingers along the drawer's edges. "Always respected her privacy, even after—" "Here," Michael said, holding up a small brass key he'd found taped under the desktop. "Hiding places haven't changed much since I was a kid." The lock turned easily, as if it had been waiting 25 years for this moment. Inside, nestled among yellowed documents and faded ribbon, was a manila envelope marked Anna, October 1999, in Helen's careful script. Sophia's hands trembled as she opened it. The first document that spilled out was a death certificate, but the details made her blood run cold. "Anna Maria Reynolds," she read aloud, her voice barely a whisper. "Date of death, January 18th, 2000. Cause of death." Her voice broke. "Multiple gunshot wounds." Michael sank onto the twin bed, his face ashen. "Gunshot wounds, but you said she died in childbirth." "That's what Grandma Helen told me." Sophia's training kicked in, helping her push through the emotional shock to examine the document clinically. According to this, she was found in an alley behind a warehouse in San Pedro, 3 months after I was born. The next document was a police report, its pages yellowed with age. Anna had been discovered by a homeless man searching for bottles, her purse missing but her ID intact. No witnesses, no suspects, no apparent motive. The case had gone cold within weeks. "Jesus Christ," Michael breathed. Anna was murdered, but it was the third document that truly shattered everything Sophia thought she knew. A letter, written in Helen's handwriting but never sent, dated February 15th, 2000. "My dearest Anna, I know you can't read this, baby girl, but I need to write it down somewhere. The police say they're doing everything they can, but I know they won't find who did this to you. Poor people like us don't get justice in this world. Sophia's growing so fast. She has your eyes, your stubborn chin. I tell her every day about her mama, how much you loved her, how you sang to her when she was still in your belly. But I don't tell her the truth about what happened. I can't. I can't tell her that you came to me that night in October, scared out of your mind, that you said the Davenport family had found out about the baby and were making threats. I can't tell her that you begged me to take Sophia and disappear, to keep her safe from people who had the power to make problems disappear. I can't tell her that I failed you, that I convinced you to stay and fight instead of running, that I thought we could handle whatever some rich family threw at us. I was wrong, and my stubbornness cost you your life. I've made up a story about Sophia's father, a soldier who died a hero. It's kinder than the truth. Better for her to think she was abandoned than to know her father's family killed her mother. I'll take this secret to my grave. It's the only way to keep her safe, all my love. Mama Helen." The letter fluttered from Sophia's numb fingers. Michael retrieved it, his face cycling through shock, horror, and something that looked like rage. "The Davenport family," Sophia said, her voice hollow. "Your family made threats against my mother." "No," the word came out strangled. "This has to be wrong. My father is a bastard, but murder he wouldn't he?" Sophia spun to face him, her military training taking over, analyzing threats and possibilities with cold precision. Rich family discovers their precious son is involved with a pregnant factory worker. They can't buy her off, can't scare her off quietly. What's the next step? Michael shook his head violently. "You don't understand. My father is ruthless in business. Yes, but this is insane. Is it?" Sophia pulled out more documents from the envelope. Newspaper clippings about young women who died under suspicious circumstances after crossing powerful families. Investigative reports about intimidation tactics used by wealthy corporations. Grandma Helen did her homework. She knew exactly what kind of people she was dealing with. There was one final item in the envelope, a small jewelry box that Sophia remembered from her childhood. Inside, nestled in faded velvet, was an engagement ring. Simple, elegant, with a princess-cut diamond that caught the light like captured starlight. The note beneath it was in Anna's handwriting. For my daughter, when she finds someone who loves her the way Michael loves me, H. Please give this to her when she's old enough to understand that love is worth fighting for, even when the world tries to tear it apart. Michael's breath hitched. That's the ring I bought for her. I searched everywhere for it after she disappeared. Sophia held the ring up to the light, watching it sparkle through her tears. She kept it. Even when she was running for her life, she kept it. The truth settled over them like a heavy blanket, suffocating, inescapable. Anna hadn't abandoned Michael. She'd been murdered for loving him, for carrying his child, and Helen had spent 25 years living with the guilt of her role in her daughter's death. My father, Michael said finally, his voice barely audible. We need to talk to my father. Sophia closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her service weapon on her hip, thinking about justice and revenge and the thin line between them. Yes, she said quietly. I think we do. Outside, the sun was setting behind the San Gabriel Mountains, painting the sky the color of blood, and in that fading light, both of them understood that their lives had just been divided into two distinct periods. Before they knew the truth, and after, nothing would ever be the same. The penthouse office of Davenport Tower occupied the entire 42nd floor, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a commanding view of downtown Los Angeles. Michael had always loved this space. The Persian rugs his mother had chosen, the mahogany desk that had belonged to his grandfather, the walls lined with photographs documenting 3 generations of Davenport's success. Tonight, however, the familiar surroundings felt like a mausoleum. Sophia sat across from him in one of the leather client chairs. Still wearing her military fatigues, her posture ramrod straight. Despite the emotional earthquake they'd both endured, the engagement ring sat between them on the desk, catching the light from the crystal chandelier above. Tell me about the search, she said quietly. It wasn't a request. It was an order delivered with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to extracting information. Michael loosened his tie, suddenly feeling suffocated by the executive costume he'd worn for so many years. Where do I even start? The beginning. October 16th, 1999. The day after my mother disappeared. He closed his eyes, and the memories came flooding back with painful clarity. I went to her apartment first thing in the morning, pounded on the door until Mrs. Gutierrez, the landlord, came out screaming at me in Spanish. She said Anna had packed up the night before, taken everything, left no forwarding address. Everything. That's what I thought then. But looking back, Michael frowned, pieces of the puzzle shifting in his mind. It was too clean, too complete. Anna was sentimental. She kept ticket stubs from our first movie, pressed flowers from our walks on the beach. She wouldn't have thrown all that away. Sophia leaned forward slightly. Someone helped her pack, or packed for her. By that afternoon, I was frantic. I called every friend of hers I could remember, went to the factory, even checked the morgues. Michael's voice cracked slightly. The factory supervisor said she'd quit without notice. Just walked out mid-shift on October 15th. Never came back for her final paycheck. He stood abruptly. Pacing to the windows, the city sprawled below them like a carpet of stars. But all he could see was the past. A 23-year-old man slowly going insane with worry and guilt. I hired the first private investigator on October 20th, he continued. Richard Stein, ex-LAPD, came highly recommended. I gave him a $10,000 retainer and told him to find her, whatever it took. What did he find? Nothing, absolutely nothing. It was like Anna had vanished from the face of the earth. Michael pressed his palm against the cool glass. Stein was thorough. I'll give him that. He checked bus stations, train terminals, hospitals in 3 states. He interviewed everyone who'd ever known her, ran her social security number. Tracked her credit cards. Dead ends everywhere. Sophia's reflection appeared beside his in the window. Two people bound by tragedy and blood, trying to understand how their lives had been shattered before they'd even met. I doubled his fee after the first month, Michael said, then tripled it. By Christmas 1999, I was obsessed. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. My father thought I was having a nervous breakdown. What did your father say about Anna's disappearance? The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Michael had been dreading it, but he knew it had to be asked. He said, Michael's jaw clenched. He said maybe it was for the best, that Anna had probably realized she didn't belong in our world and done the decent thing by leaving quietly. The decent thing. Sophia's voice was ice cold. I didn't believe him, refused to believe him. Anna loved me. I knew that in my bones she wouldn't have just walked away from what we had. Michael turned from the window, meeting Sophia's eyes. So I kept searching. He moved to a filing cabinet in the corner, its top drawer secured with a combination lock. Inside were dozens of folders, each marked with dates and investigator names. A paper trail of desperate hope spanning decades. Richard Stein worked the case for 2 years, Michael said, pulling out the files. When he retired, I hired Jessica Martinez. When she moved to Phoenix, I found David Kim, then Sarah Foster, then Tony Vasquez. He gestured at the folders. 12 different investigators over 25 years. I've spent over $2 million trying to find your mother. Sophia examined the folders, her trained eye scanning the documentation. These reports are incredibly detailed. Credit checks, employment history, witness interviews. If Mom had been alive and living under her real name anywhere in the country, they would have found her. That's what I kept telling myself. That if Anna was alive, she would have contacted me. That if she was hiding, she had a good reason. Michael's laugh was bitter. I never imagined the reason was that she was dead. He pulled out a thick folder marked Reward Campaigns and spread its contents across the desk. Missing person flyers with Anna's photograph. Newspaper ads offering rewards for information. Even a billboard he'd rented on the 101 freeway for 6 months. $500,000. He said quietly. That's what I was offering for information leading to Anna's whereabouts. In 1999, that was serious money. Serious enough that if anyone had known anything, they would have come forward. Unless they were more afraid of your father than they were motivated by the money. The accusation hit Michael like a physical blow, but he couldn't deny its logic. You think people knew what happened to Anna but were too scared to talk. I think your grandmother Helen wasn't stupid. She did her research before she wrote that letter. Sophia pulled out one of Helen's newspaper clippings. A story about a union organizer who'd died in a suspicious hit-and-run after opposing a Davenport group development project. She knew what your family was capable of. Michael sank into his chair, the weight of 25 years of willful blindness crushing down on him. I wanted to believe my father was just difficult, demanding, a hard businessman in a cutthroat industry, but not a killer. Never a killer. He looked at Sophia, this daughter he'd never known existed, this piece of Anna that had survived, and felt something break inside his chest. Do you know what the worst part is? Tell me. I built all of this for her. Michael gestured around the opulent office, at the empire that bore his family's name. Every deal, every development, every dollar. It was all supposed to be for Anna. I thought, if I could just become successful enough, powerful enough, maybe somehow she'd hear about it and come back to me. Sophia was quiet for a long moment, studying the photographs on his walls, groundbreaking ceremonies, ribbon cuttings, Michael shaking hands with mayors and governors. You never married? How could I? Anna was the only woman I ever loved. Is the only woman I ever loved. He picked up the engagement ring, its diamond catching the light. I kept this in my wallet for 25 years. Carried it everywhere. Just in case. In case what? In case she came back, in case I found her. In case... His voice broke completely. In case she needed me. The silence stretched between them, heavy with grief and rage, and a love that had never died despite everything that had tried to kill it. Finally, Sophia spoke. She did need you, and you weren't there because someone made sure you couldn't be. Michael looked up at her, seeing Anna's determination in the set of her jaw, Anna's strength in the way she held her shoulders. What are you saying? I'm saying we're going to find out exactly what your father did to my mother, and then we're going to make sure he pays for it." In the distance, thunder rumbled over the San Gabriel Mountains, the first storm of the season moving in from the Pacific. Michael thought of Anna's fear of thunderstorms, how she used to curl up against him when lightning flashed across the sky. She would never be afraid of storms again, but her daughter, their daughter, was about to become one. The Los Angeles County Hall of Records felt like a fortress of bureaucracy, its Art Deco facade hiding decades of secrets in climate-controlled vaults. Sophia moved through the marble corridors with military precision, her civilian clothes, dark jeans and a blazer, a concession to blending in while they conducted their investigation. 3 days had passed since the revelation in Helen's house. 3 days of sleepless nights and careful planning. Michael had surprised her with his determination to uncover the truth, even if it destroyed everything he'd built. This morning, they were hunting for answers that might implicate his own family in murder. Property records for the San Pedro warehouse district. 1999 to 2000, Sophia requested from the clerk, a tired-looking woman with reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain. Michael stood beside her, his usual confident demeanor replaced by nervous energy. He'd aged years in the past few days, the weight of 25 years of unanswered questions finally taking its toll. "This is where they found her," Sophia said quietly, as they waited for the records. 3 blocks from the harbor, behind a warehouse that stored imported textiles. "I know that area," Michael said, his voice hollow. Davenport Group owned several properties there in the late 90s. "We were consolidating shipping operations, trying to—" He stopped mid-sentence as the implication hit him. Sophia saw the moment understanding dawned in his eyes, watched him pale as another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. "Your family owned the warehouse where my mother was found," she said. It wasn't a question. The clerk returned with a box of files, setting it down with a heavy thud. "Everything you requested. You have 2 hours before we close." They found a table in the corner, away from prying eyes, and began methodically going through the documents. Property deeds, tax records, zoning permits, the dry bones of real estate transactions that had shaped a neighborhood. "Here," Michael said, his voice barely above a whisper. He held up a deed dated September 1999. Davenport Group purchased the Meridian Textile Warehouse on October 1st, 1999, 2 weeks before Anna disappeared. Sophia felt her pulse quicken. "That's not a coincidence." "No," Michael agreed grimly. "It's not." They dug deeper, cross-referencing the warehouse records with shipping manifests and employee databases. The picture that emerged was troubling. The warehouse had been purchased hastily for cash, with minimal due diligence. More suspicious still, it had been sold again in February 2000, just weeks after Anna's body was discovered, for a significant loss. Someone wanted to get rid of this property fast, Sophia observed, her military training kicking in as she analyzed the pattern. Buy it, use it for something, then dump it quickly. Michael was studying an employment record, his face growing darker by the minute. "Look at this. The warehouse had a skeleton crew in late 1999. Early 2000. 5 employees total, all hired through a temp agency. Let me see." Sophia scanned the list of names, her heart stopping when she reached the 3rd entry. Charles Okconor, hired October 10th, terminated February 28th, 2000. They stared at each other across the table, both recognizing the significance. Charles Okconor had been hired 5 days before Anna disappeared and fired just weeks after her body was found. "We need to find this guy," Sophia said, already reaching for her phone. "No need." Michael's voice was flat, defeated. "Charlie Okconor worked for my father for 20 years. He was his problem solver." The phrase hung in the air like a death sentence. Sophia felt something cold and predatory wake up in her chest. The same instinct that had made her an effective military officer. The ability to identify threats and neutralize them. Where is he now? Dead, heart attack in 2015, took whatever he knew to the grave. They spent the next hour combing through more records, building a timeline that painted an increasingly damning picture. The warehouse purchase, Okkonor's employment, Anna's disappearance, her murder, the quick sale of the property. It all fit together with the precision of a military operation. "There's something else," Michael said, pulling out a bank record. "Look at these wire transfers. October 20th, 1999. $50,000 transferred from a Davenport group account to an account registered to C. Okconor Consulting. Payment for services rendered, Sophia said grimly. And here, Michael pointed to another entry. January 30th, 2000. Another $50,000 to the same account. 2 weeks after Anna was found. Sophia closed her eyes, trying to process the cold brutality of it. Her mother's life had been worth $100,000 to the Davenport family, a rounding error in their annual budget. "I need some air," she said abruptly, standing so quickly that her chair scraped against the floor. Outside, the Los Angeles smog hung heavy in the afternoon heat. Sophia leaned against the building's concrete facade, trying to steady her breathing. This was worse than anything she'd encountered in her military service. At least in war, you knew who the enemy was. Here, the enemy had been hiding in plain sight for 25 years. Michael emerged from the building, carrying copies of the most damning documents. He looked like a man attending his own funeral. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I'm so goddamn sorry, Sophia. You didn't know. I should have known all those years, all that money spent on investigators, and I never once questioned whether my own family was involved." Michael's hands shook as he lit a cigarette, a habit Sophia hadn't known he had. "I was so focused on finding Anna that I never considered someone might be actively hiding her from me." Sophia studied her father. The words still felt strange in her mind, and saw a man grappling with the complete destruction of his worldview. Whatever Edward Davenport was, Michael genuinely hadn't known about his father's involvement in Anna's death. "What was your father like when Anna disappeared?" she asked. Michael took a long drag from his cigarette. Concerned, supportive even. He helped coordinate the search efforts. Used his connections with the police department to make sure Anna's case got attention. He was managing the investigation, making sure it went nowhere. Jesus. Michael dropped the cigarette, grinding it under his heel. He played me for 25 years. Let me torture myself with guilt and wondering while he knew exactly what had happened to her. A police siren wailed in the distance, its sound mixing with the constant hum of traffic. Somewhere in this concrete maze, Edward Davenport was probably in his office, conducting business, playing the role of the successful patriarch, while the blood of Sophia's mother stained his hands. "I want to hear him say it," Sophia said suddenly. "I want to look him in the eyes and make him admit what he did." Michael stubbed out his cigarette. "He'll never confess. My father didn't build an empire by admitting to his crimes. Then we'll make him. Sophia, he's dangerous. If he ordered Anna's murder, if he's capable of that kind of violence. I'm not some helpless factory worker he can intimidate." Sophia's voice carried the cold authority of someone trained to kill efficiently and without remorse. "I'm a United States Army officer with combat experience and nothing left to lose. Your father picked the wrong woman's daughter to mess with." Michael looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, Sophia saw something that might have been pride in his eyes. "Anna would have been proud of you," he said softly. "The way you're fighting for the truth, refusing to back down. She had that same fire." "Good," Sophia replied, her jaw set with determination. "Because we're going to need it." They walked back toward their cars, father and daughter united by tragedy and purpose. Behind them, the Hall of Records stood like a monument to buried secrets. But some truths refused to stay buried. The storm that had been threatening all week finally broke as they reached the parking structure, rain drumming against the concrete like gunfire. But neither of them ran for cover. They had bigger storms to face. The Davenport estate in Beverly Hills sprawled across 5 manicured acres like a monument to old money and older sins. Sophia had expected something impressive, but the reality exceeded even her cynical expectations. A Georgian colonial mansion with white columns and perfectly maintained gardens, the kind of place where murders could be planned over afternoon tea. She sat in Michael's Mercedes at the circular driveway's entrance, studying the house through the wrought iron gates. Somewhere behind those pristine walls lived the man who had ordered her mother's death, and the thought made her fingertips tingle with the urge to reach for her sidearm. "Second thoughts?" Michael asked quietly. His face was pale, his hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping him anchored to reality. "About confronting a murderer?" "No." Sophia checked her phone's recording app one more time. "About doing it without backup, maybe. He's still my father. Your father is a killer." The words came out harder than she intended, but she didn't soften them. Michael needed to understand what they were walking into. Whatever man you thought you knew, that person never existed. The gates opened at Michael's touch on the remote, and they rolled up the circular drive past fountains and topiary shaped into geometric perfection. A Hispanic woman in her 50s answered the door. Maria, the housekeeper who had worked for the family for decades. "Señor Michael," she said, her face lighting up before clouding with concern. "Your father, he is not, how do you say, having a good day." "What do you mean?" "The doctor came this morning. He is very tired. Very," she gestured vaguely at her head. "Sometimes he forgets things. Sometimes he remembers too much." Sophia and Michael exchanged glances. An elderly man with a failing memory might be more likely to reveal secrets he'd spent decades hiding. "We need to speak with him, Maria. It's important." The housekeeper led them through marble hallways lined with portraits of previous Davenport patriarchs. Men with the same cold eyes and calculating expressions. The house smelled of furniture polish and old money. A museum dedicated to a family legacy built on exploitation. They found Edward Davenport in his study, slumped in a wheelchair before a massive mahogany desk. At 75, he looked older than his years. Liver spots marking his hands, his once commanding presence diminished by age and illness. But his eyes were still sharp when they looked up, still capable of the ruthless calculation that had built an empire. "Michael," he said, his voice a shadow of its former authority. "You didn't call ahead. I have a conference call with the Singapore office in 20 minutes. "No, you don't." Michael's voice was steady, controlled. "It's Sunday, Dad, and you retired 5 years ago." Edward's confusion lasted only a moment before his gaze sharpened again, focusing on Sophia with the intensity of a predator recognizing potential prey. "Who is this? Another gold digger trying to get her claws into the family fortune?" The casual cruelty of the comment hit Sophia like a physical blow, but she kept her expression neutral. This was her grandfather, her mother's killer, and she needed him talking, not defensive. "Dad," Michael said carefully, "I'd like you to meet Sophia Reynolds. She's Anna's daughter." The effect was instantaneous. Edward's face went through a series of micro-expressions. Surprise, calculation, and something that might have been fear before settling into cold hostility. "Anna's dead," he said flatly. "Has been for 25 years. "Yes," Sophia said quietly, stepping closer to his wheelchair. "She is. The question is how you know that when everyone told me she died in childbirth." Edward's laugh was a harsh rasp. "Childbirth. Is that what the old woman told you? Helen always was a sentimental fool. You knew my grandmother. I knew everyone involved in that unfortunate situation." Edward's eyes glittered with malicious intelligence. "Had to clean up the mess properly." Michael moved to his father's other side, his face ashen. "What mess, Dad? What are you talking about?" "Your mess, boy. Your goddamn mess with that little factory whore." Edward's voice gained strength as his anger grew. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out? That you could sneak around with some gold-digging slut without consequences?" Sophia felt her military training kick in. The cold detachment that allowed her to function under extreme stress. She activated her phone's recording app and slipped it into her jacket pocket. "Tell me about Anna," she said calmly. "Tell me what happened in October 1999. Edward studied her with those predatory eyes, as if trying to decide how much truth she could handle. "You look like her," he said finally. Same stubborn chin, same defiant eyes. She had that same look when Charlie brought her to the warehouse. Michael went very still. "Charlie brought her where?" "The warehouse in San Pedro. Had to have somewhere private to discuss the situation." Edward's smile was cold as winter. "Anna was trying to extort money from this family, claiming she was pregnant with your child. Thought she could trap you into marriage, get her hands on Davenport money." "She wasn't extorting anyone," Michael said, his voice breaking. "We were in love. We were going to be married. Love." Edward spat the word like a curse. "You were 23 years old, Michael, a child playing with fire. That woman was using you, just like they all do." Sophia stepped closer to the wheelchair, close enough to smell the old man's cologne and medication. "What did you do to her?" I offered her money, $50,000 to disappear. Never contact you again. More money than a factory worker could earn in 5 years. Edward's voice was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing a routine business transaction. She refused, said she loved you, that she wouldn't take money to abandon her child's father. So you had her killed. The words hung in the air like an accusation at a tribunal. Edward met Sophia's eyes without flinching, his expression utterly without remorse. I protected my family, protected my son from making the biggest mistake of his life. He shifted in his wheelchair, wincing slightly. Charlie was supposed to scare her, make her understand the consequences of refusing reasonable terms. But she kept fighting, kept screaming about love and family and other fairy tale nonsense. Michael sank into a chair, his face buried in his hands. Dad, please tell me you didn't. She left me no choice. Edward's voice hardened. The stupid girl pulled a knife, threatened Charlie, said she'd rather die than abandon you and the baby. So Charlie accommodated her request. The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia felt the world tilt around her as 25 years of questions finally received their answer. Her mother had died fighting for love, for family, for the life she wanted to build with Michael. You killed her because she loved your son too much to be bought, Sophia said, her voice barely controlled. I eliminated a threat to this family's reputation and fortune. Anna Reynolds was a liability that needed to be managed. Edward's eyes were pitiless. I've done worse for less important reasons. Michael looked up, his face streaked with tears. How could you live with this? How could you watch me search for her, knowing what you'd done? Because you needed to learn that actions have consequences, that the choices we make define us. Edward's smile was cruel. I made you stronger, boy. Made you focus on building something lasting instead of chasing after factory trash. Sophia pulled out her phone, holding it where Edward could see the recording app. Congratulations, grandfather. You just confessed to ordering my mother's murder. Edward stared at the phone for a long moment, then began to laugh, a sound like breaking glass that filled the study with malicious joy. You think that matters? You think anyone will care about the death of some nobody from 25 years ago? He leaned forward in his wheelchair, his voice dropping to a whisper. I own judges, police commissioners, district attorneys. That recording will disappear faster than your mother did. Maybe, Sophia said quietly. But you've already lost the only thing that really mattered. She looked at Michael, saw the moment when love finally died in his eyes, replaced by something colder and infinitely more dangerous. You're not my father, Michael said, his voice steady as granite. Not anymore. Edward's triumphant expression faltered as he realized what he'd destroyed in his moment of cruel honesty. But it was too late. The truth was finally free, and it would consume everything in its path. The Santa Monica Pier stretched into the Pacific like a wooden finger pointing toward infinity, its neon lights blurring through the tears. Sophia refused to let fall. She sat on the same bench where Michael had told her he and Anna used to watch sunsets, where they'd planned a future that Edward Davenport had murdered along with her mother. 3 hours had passed since they'd fled the Beverly Hills mansion, since Edward's confession had shattered whatever remained of their carefully constructed worlds. Michael sat beside her now, staring at the waves with the hollow expression of a man who'd just watched his entire life revealed as a lie. I keep thinking about all the times he comforted me, Michael said, his voice barely audible over the crash of waves. All the times he patted my shoulder and told me Anna would want me to move on, to build something meaningful with my life. Sophia wrapped her arms around herself. Though the evening wasn't cold, he was manipulating you, making sure you channeled your grief into something that benefited him. 25 years. Michael's laugh was bitter. 25 years of him playing the supportive father while he knew exactly where Anna was buried. Exactly how she died. Jesus Christ, Sophia. He probably went to sleep every night feeling proud of what he'd accomplished. A family walked past them on the boardwalk. Mother, father, 2 young children clutching cotton candy and balloons. The picture of normal life. The kind of family Sophia had dreamed about as a child. The kind of family her mother had died trying to protect. I don't know who I am anymore, she admitted, the words torn from somewhere deep in her chest. Everything I believed about myself, about my family, about my father. It was all a lie. Michael turned to look at her, and she saw her own devastation reflected in his eyes. "You're Anna's daughter. That's the only truth that matters. I'm also Edward Davenport's granddaughter. I'm the granddaughter of the man who murdered my mother." The words tasted like poison. "What does that make me? Human? Complicated? Just like the rest of us?" But Sophia couldn't accept his reassurance, couldn't push past the images flooding her mind. Edward's cold smile as he described Anna's death, the casual way he dismissed a young woman's life as inconsequential, the proud satisfaction in his voice as he'd explained how he'd protected his family's interests. "I have his blood in my veins," she whispered. "His DNA. What if I'm capable of the same things he is?" "Don't." Michael's voice was sharp. "Don't you dare let that bastard poison who you are. You're nothing like him. How do you know? How can anyone know what they're truly capable of until they're tested?" Sophia stood abruptly, pacing to the pier's railing. "Right now, I want to go back to that house and put a bullet in his head. I want to watch him die slowly, the way my mother did. What does that say about me? That you're angry, that you love your mother, that you're human, or that I'm Edward Davenport's granddaughter?" The words hung between them like a confession. Michael joined her at the railing, his hands gripping the weathered wood with white knuckles. "I've been thinking the same thing about myself," he said quietly, "wondering what it means that I'm his son, that I built my fortune using methods he taught me, connections he provided. How much of my success came from blood money?" Sophia glanced at him sideways. "You didn't know. Didn't I deep down? Didn't I always know there was something wrong with the way our family did business, the way problems just disappeared when they threatened our interests?" Michael's voice cracked. "I told myself it was just ruthless capitalism. But what if I was willfully blind because the alternative was too horrible to face?" A seagull landed on the railing near them, its black eyes bright and predatory as it searched for scraps. Sophia thought of Edward's eyes, the same calculating hunger for whatever served his purposes. "The worst part," she said, "is that I understand his logic. Military training teaches you to eliminate threats to accomplish the mission. In his mind, my mother was a threat to his family's mission. That doesn't make it right. No, but it makes it comprehensible. And that terrifies me." Sophia turned to face Michael fully. "What if understanding that kind of thinking means I'm capable of it myself?" Michael was quiet for a long moment, watching the waves roll endlessly toward shore. "Do you know what Anna used to say about difficult choices?" "No. She said that being a good person isn't about never having bad thoughts or dark impulses. It's about choosing not to act on them, even when acting would be easier." He managed a small, sad smile. "She said the fact that you wrestle with your conscience proves you have one. She sounds wise. She was wiser than I deserved." Michael's expression darkened again. "If I'd been stronger, if I'd stood up to my father sooner, maybe she'd still be alive. Or maybe you'd both be dead." Sophia's military pragmatism kicked in. Edward Davenport didn't get to where he was by accepting defiance. If you'd opposed him directly, you might have ended up in that warehouse too. The thought chilled them both. How easily their love story could have ended in double tragedy, leaving no one to remember Anna Reynolds or seek justice for her death. "So what do we do now?" Michael asked. Edward was right about one thing. That recording won't be enough to convict him. He has too much power, too many connections. Sophia had been thinking about this since they'd left Beverly Hills, running through options with the systematic thoroughness her training had instilled. Legal justice might be impossible, but that doesn't mean he gets away with it. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that Edward Davenport built his empire on secrets and intimidation. What happens when those secrets become public? When everyone knows what kind of man he really is?" Michael's eyes sharpened. "The media, if we can get the story out there, document everything we've found. The Davenport Group's stock price would crater, business relationships would evaporate, his legacy would become synonymous with murder." Sophia felt something cold and purposeful settle in her chest. He wanted to protect his family's reputation. Let's see how he feels when that reputation becomes toxic. "It would destroy everything I've built too, my company, my relationships, my reputation in the industry." "I know." Sophia studied his face, looking for signs of retreat. "Are you willing to sacrifice all of that for my mother's memory?" Michael didn't hesitate. Anna was worth more than all of it combined. If burning down everything I've built is the price of justice for her, then let it burn. The decision crystallized between them like a pact sealed in blood. They would sacrifice their comfortable lives, their financial security, their places in society, to ensure that Anna Reynolds was remembered as more than just another victim of the powerful. "There's something else," Sophia said carefully. "Once we go public with this story, there's no going back. Edward won't just accept the destruction of his reputation quietly. He'll fight back with everything he has. Are you worried about what he might do?" Sophia thought of her military training, of the weapons she knew how to use, of the protective instincts that had kept her alive in combat zones. "I'm worried about what I might do to him first." The admission hung between them like a loaded weapon. Father and daughter, bound by love for a murdered woman, and the shared capacity for violence that ran in their blood. The question wasn't whether they would seek justice for Anna Reynolds. The question was what form that justice would take, and whether they would recognize themselves when it was finished. The law offices of Patricia Chen and Associates occupied the 20th floor of a Century City high-rise, its glass walls offering a panoramic view of Los Angeles sprawling toward the Pacific. Patricia Chen herself was a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and the kind of sharp intelligence that had made her the most feared investigative attorney on the West Coast. Sophia sat across from her at the polished conference table, watching Chen review the evidence they'd compiled over the past week. Michael had found Chen through his network, one of the few lawyers in the city who wasn't connected to the Davenport family's web of influence. "This is extraordinary," Chen said finally, setting down Edward's recorded confession. "In 30 years of practice, I've rarely seen a case with this level of documentation, bank records, property transfers, witness statements, and now a full confession." "But," Michael prompted, sensing the hesitation in her voice, "but Edward Davenport is right about one thing. His connections run deep. The district attorney's office has received substantial contributions from the Davenport group over the years. The police commissioner served on the board of your family's charitable foundation." Chen leaned back in her chair. Getting a conviction would be challenging. Sophia had expected this, had seen it in Afghanistan, where local warlords bought their way out of consequences while their victims rotted in unmarked graves. Justice, it seemed, had a price tag everywhere. "What about federal charges?" she asked. "Interstate commerce, racketeering, something outside local jurisdiction?" "Possible. But the statute of limitations has expired on most potential federal crimes. And honestly, the FBI has bigger fish to fry than a 25-year-old murder case." Chen's expression was sympathetic but realistic. "I'm not saying it's impossible, just that the odds of a criminal conviction are minimal." Michael's jaw tightened. "So he gets away with it, again?" "Not necessarily." Chen pulled out a thick folder. "Criminal court isn't the only avenue for justice. Civil court has different standards, different timelines. A wrongful death lawsuit could expose everything publicly, force Edward to face the evidence under oath." "Would we win?" Sophia asked. "Against Edward Davenport with his resources and legal team?" Chen shrugged. "Maybe, but even if we lost the case, we'd win the war. The media coverage alone would destroy his reputation, crater the company's stock price, turn the Davenport name into a liability." Sophia thought about this. Public exposure, financial ruin, social disgrace. It wasn't the clean justice of a criminal conviction, but it was something, more than Anna Reynolds had gotten in 25 years. "There's another option," Michael said quietly. Both women turned to him. He was staring out the window at the city below, his expression unreadable. "I could destroy him myself," he continued. "From the inside, I still have access to Davenport Group systems, financial records, business relationships. I could expose every dirty deal, every bribe, every corner they've cut over the decades." "That would be corporate suicide," Chen warned. "You'd be implicating yourself in any illegal activities, facing criminal charges, civil lawsuits, complete financial ruin." "Good." Michael's smile was bitter. "I helped build that empire on blood money. Maybe it's time I paid the price for my willful blindness." Sophia studied her father, this man who'd spent 25 years searching for her mother. Never knowing he was related to her killer, the guilt was eating him alive, transforming him into someone she barely recognized. "There's a third option," she said slowly. Chen raised an eyebrow. "Which is, we let Edward face the consequences of old age and failing health. He's 75, showing signs of dementia. Probably won't live much longer anyway. Sophia's voice was steady, clinical. Sometimes the universe provides its own justice. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken implications. They all understood what she was really saying, that they could wait for Edward to die naturally, saving themselves the trauma and uncertainty of a legal battle they might not win. That's not justice, Michael said finally. That's just waiting. Sometimes waiting is the wisest course of action. Sophia had learned this lesson in the military, that not every battle was worth fighting, that strategic patience could be more effective than direct confrontation. Edward's confession proves Anna didn't abandon you, didn't die in vain. Maybe that knowledge is enough. But even as she said the words, she felt them ring hollow. Her mother had been murdered, and letting her killer die peacefully in his bed felt like betraying everything Anna had fought for in that warehouse. Chen cleared her throat. There's something else you should consider. I've been researching similar cases, other instances where powerful families have covered up violent crimes. In every case I found, the cover-up eventually unraveled. Truth has a way of surfacing, especially in the digital age. She pulled out a newspaper clipping from 2018. The Pemberton family in San Francisco covered up their son's involvement in a hit-and-run for 15 years, thought they'd buried it completely. Then a witness came forward with cell phone footage, and the whole family empire collapsed in 6 months. What are you saying? I'm saying that keeping this secret may be impossible in the long run. Edward's confession could leak. Other victims might come forward. The story might break with or without your involvement. Chen leaned forward. The question is whether you want to control the narrative or let others control it for you. Sophia felt the weight of decision settling on her shoulders. In the military, choices were often binary. Engage the enemy or withdraw, follow orders or face court-martial. This was more complex, a web of consequences that would ripple outward for years. What would Anna want? She asked quietly. Michael was quiet for a long moment. She'd want the truth. Anna never backed down from a fight when she believed in something, never took the easy path when the right path was available. His voice grew stronger. She'd want other families to be safe from men like Edward. She'd want her death to mean something, even if it destroyed everything you've built. Especially then. Michael turned from the window to face them both. I've spent 25 years building monuments to my guilt. Maybe it's time to tear them down and build something better. Chen nodded approvingly. If we're going to do this, we need to be strategic, document everything, prepare for a media blitz, coordinate with law enforcement at the federal level. She paused. And you need to understand that once we file these papers, there's no going back. Edward Davenport won't go quietly. I know. Sophia thought of her grandfather's cold eyes, his casual dismissal of human life. But my mother didn't have a choice when she faced him. At least we do. They spent the next 2 hours planning their strategy, which evidence to release first, which media outlets to approach, how to protect themselves from retaliation. It felt like preparing for war, because in many ways, that's exactly what it was. As they prepared to leave, Chen handed Sophia a business card. My direct line. When Edward realizes what you're doing, things are going to get ugly fast. Don't hesitate to call. Outside, the Los Angeles sun was setting behind a haze of smog and marine layer, painting the sky the color of old blood. Sophia and Michael walked to their cars in comfortable silence, both understanding that they'd just committed to a path that would change their lives forever. No regrets? Michael asked as they reached the parking garage. Sophia thought of her mother, alone and terrified in that warehouse, fighting for love and family right up until the end. None, she said. Anna Reynolds deserves better than she got. It's time we gave it to her. The die was cast. Justice, whatever form it took, was finally coming for Edward Davenport. The Eternal Rest Cemetery in East Los Angeles was nothing like the manicured memorial parks where the wealthy buried their dead. Here, modest headstones crowded together under the shadow of palm trees, marking the final resting places of working people who'd lived quiet lives far from the spotlight of scandal and wealth. Sophia knelt beside a simple granite marker that read, Anna Maria Reynolds, 1976-2000, beloved mother. The inscription Helen had chosen 24 years ago, when she'd finally been able to give her daughter a proper burial. The grave had been unmarked for months after Anna's murder, her body held in the county morgue, while police pursued leads that would never materialize. "I brought someone to meet you, Mom," Sophia whispered, her fingers tracing the carved letters of her mother's name. Michael stood a few feet behind her, holding a bouquet of yellow roses, Anna's favorite, according to the memories he'd shared over the past 2 weeks. Since filing the wrongful death lawsuit, they'd spent countless hours together, piecing together the story of Anna's life from fragments of memory and faded photographs. "She's beautiful, Anna," Michael said softly, his voice carrying across the quiet cemetery. "Strong and brave, just like you. She has your eyes, your determination to fight for what's right." Sophia felt tears prick at her eyes, but they were different tears than she'd shed before. Not the bitter tears of loss and anger, but something softer, warmer, the tears of someone finally coming home. The media storm had been everything Patricia Chen had predicted, and more. The Los Angeles Times had run the story on the front page. Real estate mogul's father confesses to 25-year-old murder. CNN had picked it up within hours. Then Fox News. Then every major network. Edward Davenport's carefully constructed image as a philanthropic businessman had crumbled in real time, replaced by the reality of a cold-blooded killer who'd ordered the death of his son's pregnant girlfriend. The Davenport Group's stock price had plummeted 40% in 3 days. Business partners were fleeing, charitable organizations were returning donations, and the district attorney, feeling public pressure despite his connections to the family, had announced a renewed investigation into Anna's murder. "The lawyer called this morning," Michael said, settling on the grass beside Anna's grave. "Edward's attorneys are trying to claim diminished capacity, saying the confession isn't valid because of his dementia. Will it work? Chen doesn't think so. The recording is too clear, too detailed, and we have all the supporting evidence. The property records, bank transfers, witness statements. Even if they can't prosecute him criminally, the civil case is solid." Sophia nodded, but found herself thinking less about legal victories and more about the life her mother had never gotten to live. "Tell me about your plans," she said. "After this is all over." Michael had spent the past week dismantling his own empire with the same methodical precision he'd once used to build it, divesting himself of Davenport Group holdings, liquidating assets, preparing to walk away from everything that connected him to his father's blood money. "I'm keeping just enough to start over," he said. "Maybe a small construction company, building affordable housing instead of luxury towers, something Anna would have been proud of. And the rest? The Anna Reynolds Foundation? Anna scholarships for the children of single mothers, legal aid for families facing intimidation from powerful interests, support for women trying to escape abusive situations." His smile was sad, but genuine. 25 years too late. But maybe it can help other families avoid what happened to us. The sun was setting behind the downtown skyline, painting the cemetery in golden light. Other visitors moved quietly among the graves. Elderly women leaving flowers. Young men standing with military precision at veterans' markers. Children playing hide-and-seek between the headstones with the casual acceptance of death that came from growing up in neighborhoods where loss was common. "I've been thinking about names," Sophia said suddenly. "Names. Reynolds Davenport. It feels right somehow, honoring both sides of who I am, the good and the bad." She glanced at Michael. "If that's okay with you." "Anna would love that," he said, his voice thick with emotion. She always believed in bringing opposite things together, finding harmony in contradiction. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness settled over the cemetery, neither ready to leave this place where all their questions had finally found answers. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Edward's legal team would fight back. The media attention would intensify, and they would both have to rebuild their lives from the wreckage of revealed truths. But tonight, they were simply a father and daughter visiting the grave of the woman who had loved them both enough to die for them. "There's something else," Michael said eventually. "I've been working with a private investigator, not to find Anna this time, but to find the truth about other cases. Other times when Edward or his associates might have used violence to protect family interests." Sophia looked at him sharply. "How many others do you think there might be?" "I don't know, but Chen was right about truth having a way of surfacing. If we're going public with Anna's story, we owe it to other victims to investigate whether she was the only one." The thought was sobering. Anna's murder might not have been an isolated incident, but part of a pattern, a systematic approach to eliminating threats that had gone on for decades. How many other young women had disappeared? How many other families had been torn apart by the Davenport family's version of problem-solving? "We'll need security," Sophia said, her military training asserting itself. "If Edward was willing to kill once, he might try again, especially if he thinks we're going to expose other crimes." Already arranged, Chen recommended a firm that specializes in protecting whistleblowers and their families. Michael's expression was grim. "We're not the only ones who've crossed powerful people and lived to tell about it." A night breeze stirred the palm fronds overhead, carrying the scent of jasmine from someone's garden and the distant sound of traffic on the freeway. Los Angeles never really slept, never stopped moving, never paused to mourn its casualties. But here in this quiet corner of the city, Anna Reynolds was finally being remembered not as a victim, but as a woman who had fought for love and family until her last breath. "I want to plant a garden here," Sophia said suddenly. "Yellow roses like the ones you brought, maybe some of those white gardenias she loved, and jasmine for the scent. The cemetery might not allow it. Then we'll ask permission, and if they say no, we'll find another way." Sophia's voice carried the same determination that had once driven Anna to refuse Edward's blood money. "Mom deserves beauty around her. She deserves to be remembered not just as a murder victim, but as someone who brought joy and love into the world." Michael smiled, the first genuinely happy expression she'd seen on his face since they'd met. Anna always said that love was the only thing that lasted, the only thing worth fighting for. Even when everything else fell apart, love endured. As they finally prepared to leave, Sophia placed her hand on her mother's headstone one more time. "We're going to make this right, Mom. I promise. Your death won't be in vain." The promise felt sacred, binding, like an oath taken before God and witnessed by the stars appearing in the darkening sky. Anna Reynolds had been silenced for 25 years, but her voice would finally be heard, and that voice would demand justice for every woman who had been dismissed as expendable. Every family that had been torn apart by those who believed wealth and power placed them above consequence. The reckoning was just beginning. 6 months later, the garden around Anna's grave had transformed into something that would have made her smile. Yellow roses climbed a small white trellis, their blooms bright against the morning sky, while white gardenias filled the air with their sweet perfume. Jasmine cascaded from carefully placed planters, and a small stone bench provided a place for quiet reflection. Sophia knelt among the flowers, her hands deep in the rich soil as she planted the last of the spring bulbs. The cemetery had not only approved their garden plan, but had featured it in their newsletter as an example of how families could create meaningful memorials. What had started as a simple request had become something larger, a testament to love persisting beyond death. "The tulips should come up just in time for her birthday," Sophia said as Michael approached with 2 cups of coffee from the food truck that had become a regular fixture outside the cemetery gates. The media attention had brought unexpected visitors to Anna's grave, people who had never known her but were moved by her story, leaving flowers and notes and prayers. "She would have loved this," Michael said, settling on the bench they'd installed last month. His face had aged in the past 6 months, the stress of legal battles and public scrutiny taking its toll, but there was a peace in his expression that hadn't been there before. All these people who never met her, but who understand what she fought for. The wrongful death lawsuit had concluded 3 weeks ago with a settlement that made headlines across the country. $20 million in damages, plus Edward's admission of guilt in a statement read aloud in open court. It wasn't the criminal conviction they'd hoped for. Edward's lawyers had successfully argued diminished capacity due to his advancing dementia. But it was vindication, recognition that Anna Reynolds' life had mattered. More importantly, it had opened floodgates. 3 other families had come forward with similar stories, cases where the Davenport group's problem-solving had left people dead or missing. The FBI had opened a racketeering investigation, and Edward's carefully constructed legacy was crumbling piece by piece. "Any word from the district attorney's office?" Sophia asked, brushing soil from her hands. "They're moving forward with charges on the Martinez case from 2003, apparently. Charlie Okconor kept records, and his widow found them when she was cleaning out his storage unit last month." Michael's smile was grim with satisfaction. Even dead, that bastard might finally face justice. Sophia nodded, but her attention was focused on the garden. On the life blooming around her mother's grave, she'd learned, over these months of legal battles and media interviews, that justice came in many forms. Sometimes it was a verdict in a courtroom, sometimes it was a story told on the evening news, and sometimes it was simply refusing to let someone be forgotten. "I have something for you," Michael said, reaching into his jacket pocket. The small velvet box was worn with age, its corners soft from years of handling. Inside, nestled in faded satin, was a simple gold band set with a modest diamond, the engagement ring Anna had kept even as she fled for her life. "It's yours," Michael said quietly. "It was always meant to be yours, even when I didn't know you existed." Sophia lifted the ring from its box, watching it catch the morning light. The diamond was small by today's standards, but it represented something much larger, a love so powerful it had survived murder, cover-up, and 25 years of separation. "I've been thinking about names again," she said, slipping the ring onto her right hand. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all these years. "Oh, Reynolds Davenport doesn't feel right anymore. Too much of his poison mixed with her memory." Sophia studied the ring, watching light dance through the faceted stone. "I think I want to be just Reynolds, Anna's daughter, carrying on what she started." Michael was quiet for a long moment, and she worried she'd hurt his feelings. But when she looked up, he was smiling through tears. "Anna would be so proud," he said. "She always believed in the power of choosing your own identity, creating yourself from scratch when the world tried to define you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching other visitors move through the cemetery. A young mother with her toddler son, teaching him to place flowers gently on a grave. An elderly man in a veteran's cap, standing at attention before a military marker. A teenage girl with purple hair and combat boots, reading poetry aloud to someone who could no longer hear her voice. Death, Sophia had learned, was not an ending, but a transformation. Anna Reynolds lived on in every story told about her courage, every family that found strength in her example. Every person who refused to be silenced by those who believed power made them untouchable. "There's something else I need to tell you," Michael said eventually. "The foundation is ready to launch officially. Full funding, board of directors, everything we discussed." The Anna Reynolds Foundation had become Michael's obsession over the past months, his way of channeling grief into something productive. Legal aid for families facing intimidation, scholarships for children of single mothers, safe houses for women escaping dangerous situations, emergency funds for families whose breadwinners had been murdered for opposing powerful interests. "How much?" Sophia asked. $50 million to start. Everything I had left after divesting from the family business." Michael's voice was steady, matter of fact. "I kept enough to live modestly. Help with your college expenses if you decide to go back to school. The rest goes to making sure no other family suffers what we did." Sophia felt tears gathering in her eyes. Not the bitter tears of loss she'd shed so often these past months, but tears of gratitude and love. Michael had given up everything. His fortune, his business empire, his social standing, to honor a woman he'd lost 25 years ago. "She would have married you," Sophia said suddenly. "If Edward hadn't intervened, if she'd lived, you would have been happy together. Maybe. Or maybe we would have struggled like every other young couple, fought about money and family and whether to have more children." Michael's smile was bittersweet. "But we would have had the chance to find out. That's all anyone can ask for. The chance to see where love leads." A groundskeeper approached them, pushing a wheelbarrow full of mulch. Over the months, the cemetery staff had become familiar with their regular visits, had taken pride in helping maintain Anna's garden. This was Jose, a man in his 50s who'd known Anna from the old neighborhood. "Miss Sophia," he said in accented English. "The roses, they're growing so fast, your mama. She would be so happy to see them. Thank you, Jose, for everything." As the groundskeeper moved on to tend other graves, Sophia stood and brushed the soil from her jeans. The garden was complete now, a living memorial that would bloom and grow and change with the seasons. Like memory itself, it would require tending, but it would endure. "Ready?" Michael asked, though neither of them moved toward the cemetery gates. "Almost." Sophia knelt one more time beside her mother's headstone, placing her palm against the sun-warmed granite. "We did it, Mom. We got justice. We got the truth. and we're going to make sure your story helps other people." The wind stirred the rose petals, scattering them across the grave like confetti. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell was ringing, marking another hour in the endless flow of time. But here, in this quiet corner of eternity, Anna Reynolds was finally at peace. Her daughter and the man who had loved her were building the future she had died trying to protect. And in that future, love would triumph over power, truth would overcome deception, and no one would be dismissed as expendable ever again. The garden would bloom for generations, a testament to the woman who had refused to be silenced and the family that had finally found its way home.